Thanks for joining me today. I am blessed to have Christine Yip with me, who is the author of the book Power Up: How to Improve Productivity and Innovation. And Christine is also an MBA lecturer. Um, Christine, thank you for joining me today. I'm very grateful. And for those watching, there's a very significant time difference between us. Christine is getting ready to go to bed. It's 9 p.m. there in New Zealand. It's 5 a.m. here in Detroit, Michigan. So, Christine, thank you so much. I'm very grateful. I was wondering, would you mind just kind of doing a brief intro to who you are and how we ended up here today talking about this wonderful book you published?
Thank you for having me, and really nice to be here as well. So I am Christine. I am originally from Hong Kong. About 22 years ago, I moved from Hong Kong to New Zealand to study. And that is in New Zealand that I started my career in logistics. So as you probably can imagine, as a young graduate at university, generally you don't really get into any of the high pay management job. And so one of my first job was administration in postal logistics. And I realized actually call center get paid more. So eventually I got into the operation. Throughout about on and off 8 years, I have done different jobs like account management. I then moved to operational network performance. And that was an interesting place where I looked after the whole nationwide New Zealand postal logistic performance. And
Wow.
so yes, and that was an eye-opening experience, dealing with the board level, also in the middle management, trying to work with the frontline staff. And I have been a frontline staff myself, and so that really gave me a really full breadth of the industry. Eventually, I moved on to do more analytic and project management and technology. I was trying to get back into the information system, my core sort of study area. And I found that was interestingly, this is a time when logistics and also manufacturing industry also trying to move to more innovation focus. We now have GPS, we now have like tracking, we now have so many apps in this kind of space. And so I was doing a lot of this job to basically roll out technology. And long story short, there was a lot of obstacle, fun challenges, yeah, that's the partly why I started to think, okay, well, if we've gone through 10 plus years of change management, looking at technology change in the sector, how can we consolidate some of the experience into maybe in a book easy to read to help the upcoming leaders? So that's how I started the book.
Oh, okay. Well, it's a pretty clear path towards that. So now the book came out last year, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. And can you, for those out there who are at that spot where you were, where they're saying there's got to be an easier way, how can I help people better understand whatever it is they're doing? Can you walk us through what the path? I mean, the writing of the book, we get that. You sit down, you got to put your ideas on paper. How do you go from you've got an idea to you have a published book?
I started off thinking that, of course, I got an idea that the book was going to be useful. I want to consolidate the experience. And then the next thing was what would be the main theme. In the very beginning, I knew I want to write a book, and I roughly have an idea it's about technology. I've got 10 plus years in the industry. So I had to actually refine in terms of the actual core message. So that was understanding who may be the people reading it. So be very specific on the people audience. And for example, I did things like doing an empathy map of the person who may be reading the book, so that I can write with a particular personality, a persona in mind, and that helped me structure there's different chapters of the book. So not just about, say, technology, because I know a lot of us come from operational and then go up to leadership and then leading to innovation. So there's a balance of message that makes it interesting to read if you're not already doing the leadership, but also if you're already in leadership, it may help you think through the next step. So that is where the evolution of idea went.
Okay. And so from a publishing perspective, did you partner with a publishing company or did you self-publish?
I explored the publishing company path, and I realized there's so much there's a lot of control and also a lot of copyright restrictions. So I decided that actually self-publishing would have been it is a better way to go. So I went self-publishing. Yeah, I had a taste of now publishing sort of conference paper with a publisher through a publishing house, and it's just not comparable. Like the amount of like freedom for me to use my own work outside, like with my own within my own domain. There's not so much restriction with a publishing house. So yeah, that was my decision to go self-publish.
So I'll share the link, but the book is available on Amazon at a really decent price. So how does that work when you do self-publishing? Is it, I know Amazon has a program where essentially it's print on demand, so that when someone buys the book, they print the book and they send the book. Is that the program that you used for this?
Yes, that's right. Yes, for Amazon and international readers particularly, it's a lot easier. For New Zealand and Australian, you have a different channel, and I've got some of the hard copy, like the one I've got here, and so that I can share a lot easier within this local region. Yeah, it works well enough for me.
Okay, and is there an audio version currently, or do you have an audio version planned?
Have in mind. I've got a lot of different projects at the moment, so I haven't got around to that. But I would really like to have an audio version eventually. I know so many of us like working and listening to podcasts and like audiobook. So I think, for people who are on the job and wanting to have something intelligent to listen to, that'd be really good.
Yeah, I would agree, and which is part of the reason why I started the YouTube channel was I have a series that I've written about people's learning styles, and one of the things I encourage folks to do is to know their learning style, and I tell the story about when I was in my mid-20s and I was working retail in the United States. I was working at a bookstore of all places, and I stumbled upon John Maxwell audio cassettes. That gives you an idea of what year that was, and I. Previously, reading wasn't my strong suit. I knew how to read, but what I would find is I was so ADHD that I would start reading and then I would think about something and I would keep reading, but I wasn't retaining. I was turning pages, but I was thinking about something else. And when I learned my learning style, and that is I'm an audio and a visual learner, it really just opened up a whole new set of opportunities for me because once I knew how I learned, I was able to really expose myself to that kind of material. And I credit John Maxwell with that because had I not stumbled upon his book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, which I recently learned just happens to be the #1 selling book of all time. I was shocked about that. I would have thought that was the Bible, but apparently it's John Maxwell, who is a Christian minister here in the United States. I don't know if he has a worldwide presence or not, but so I always ask this question of any author, do you plan to do either an audio or a visual conversion of your product? And I don't mean it as an insult, but I know that what I have learned is since I've started converting a lot of my writing to YouTube videos,
Yes.
my audience has grown, and which is the great thing about YouTube. Outside of all of the great things about YouTube of being able to post so easily and really unrestricted, put information out there. YouTube actually tells you how many people are looking at your product, where they're from, and I was stunned because I was so focused on getting subscribers that I wasn't focused on the fact that like people are watching my stuff at a much higher rate than I thought. Um, and when I started to look at that data, I thought, well, it's helping people because they're watching the videos.
Mm.
Uh, and even if they're watching the videos and laughing at me, I'm all right with that.
I know what you mean now. I'm feeling like quite like, yeah, I do a lot of writing over the last few years. And it's almost feels like the thinking has settled enough where I've got a book out, I've got some of these like knowledge that I want to condense. Now it's about I just like to connect with people. And particularly when we have like conversation like this, I
Mhm.
found this actually like much easier to sort of connect and learn from each other's perspective, which is actually a much more interactive and interesting experience from, okay, I've read a book, now what?
Mhm. Yeah, so you're a professor, so you're very accustomed to getting in front of large groups of people and talking. Do you record any of your lectures and are they available anywhere online?
I have got some recording of my past speech, and I spoke in public, like online forum as well. So what I have been doing is I am starting to work on my material so that I can put it on my website and eventually on YouTube. Um, I personally like to listen to things while I work. I think a lot of us have that sort of like we want to have a bit of vibe in the background while we do maybe manual repetitive work, that sort of thing. And yeah, I like talking to people, like having a conversation like this is perfect for me.
Yeah, yeah. So it kind of got me thinking about this. Is our online courses, are those popular in New Zealand?
They are very popular, yes. The different kind of online courses I found, online courses that's one directional is usually not that attractive. Like a lot of us, you probably one of them, if you not identified yourself that would skip and think about something else. It's generally very distracting, particularly after a very long day of working, right?
Yeah.
Um, for the things that I do online course and the teaching, they are cohort based, so they're interactive. So there are breakout rooms and more sort of conversational, where of course we touch on things that are useful, but the group sharing, the participation of project makes it a lot more fun. And you really feel like you experience something and doing something rather than okay, you look at camera, we might as well play your YouTube channel in the background, right?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because when I went back to school and finished my bachelor's degree, um, I had done it in several iterations, and
Mm.
I had moved away from the university, taken a job in a different city, and the first iteration was kind of what you talked about. It was a professor on camera talking to the camera, and you log in and watch the video at your own leisure, and then you get assignments based on what they talked about. And so I've done a number of those classes, and you're absolutely right. They're so hard because life happens. And
Mm.
the benefit is life can happen. You can pause the video and come back to it. The downside is guys like me with ADHD, I'm off thinking about spaceships and rockets, and they're talking about anthropology. Um, and so my final iteration when I actually graduated, it was more of this. It was you had to log in at the time they were teaching the class. You could do it from anywhere in the world, but it was live. And you would be asked questions. You'd have to participate just like you're sitting in the classroom.
Mm.
And yeah, what I found that to be very, very beneficial. And when there were moments where that wasn't the case, where it was just a video, it was still interactive to the point where you would watch a section of video, there would be a pause, there would be a question and answer piece where you're typing into a chat box. And well, what was cool about it was because you're all over the world, people taking this class, generally you're not the only one in there at that time watching and participating. And so, it was very much like a social media site where my comment goes live, other people are able to comment on my comment, and it was really an interactive experience. And I know that with technology, it's just getting better and better. So it's got to be an interesting world that you're living in, where
Mm-hmm.
you've constantly got all these evolving tools that can connect you to more and more students.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing is once the student got talking, and it doesn't matter whether they are from the same industry or not, quite often the business challenges are the same, particularly when it comes to, oh, we need to think outside of the box. How do we do something new? Particularly technology challenges are all over the place now. And these are the things that quite commonly place when we have a discussion with each other, and that kind of exchange of feedback and idea usually generate some new insight, sort of pollinate each other's world, where I can maybe borrow from your industry practice may be useful for mine. And that's when I found it really useful. And quite a lot of the time in the past, when I was working, say I've got 10 plus years in logistics, right? But then because I also have exposure in IT, so the way they do things, which is different from our traditional business, and the differences makes it interesting. And that means that the company I work for can adapt different places because I can at least contribute and help them understand.
Yeah, that's that. Well, I admire what you do. I've learned over the years that I'm not a good instructor. I have super low patience. I'm okay saying things once or twice, but when I've had to tell the same people something more than once or twice, my frustration level starts to build. So that's something I'm working on. Is I'm trying to be more patient in my instruction. So I greatly respect that.
I think over the years we will grow into become more patient and wise, don't we?
Yeah, we certainly do. So speaking of that, of growing more patient wise over the years, is there another book on the horizon, or what does the next 5 years look like for Christine?
The next 5 years is a lot of sustainability work and innovation. Yes, these two are the key themes. And what I'm really keen to do is building on what we just talked about in the book, productivity and innovation, freeing up some of the leaders that we have, which currently doing a lot of firefighting, to actually free up space in the head space and time to do more sustainability innovation. I think the world needs it. We know we need it. And of course, sustainability is not just about climate change and greenhouse gas. There's a whole lot of how do we make each other's world better, maybe socially more diverse, all of this stuff that's just looking after each other better.
Yeah, well, that anybody who follows me knows that's kind of my jam. Being a better human, and I appreciate that because we had a conversation about the current state of the logistics industry, and I think that this next generation coming up, you're right, it's going to be about sustainability. And you had mentioned before we went live that the world learned how important logistics is during COVID. And, I think what we're seeing is, I don't know, maybe it's kind of like a slinky effect right now. Is logistics got a whole bunch of attention, and a whole bunch of people made a career shift during COVID because their career shut down, their industry shut down, and they had to find something. And I think that we're starting to see kind of a slowdown where you've got companies cutting back. Amazon being one of them, who has made some pretty heavy strides in or not strides, I'm going to say pretty heavy headlines in some of their cuts. But I think that you're right. I think that over the course of the next 5 years, we're going to see a lot of efforts placed into, okay, how do we sustain this so that we don't see some of the ups and downs that some of the other industries have seen? Because as we look around, I mentioned this to you, and I've said this in front of live audiences before. Every single thing we come in contact with was brought to us by logistics. The only thing that we don't touch is Mother Nature. So the wind, the rain, the trees, and sometimes even trees are brought to you by Mother Nature, depending on who planted it there. Or I'm sorry, brought to you by logistics, because every single thing in our world had to get there somehow, and it was most likely somebody within our industry who put it there, who brought it there, who made point A to point B happen. So I think that there's a lot of work that has to be done in the sustainability area. And I do think it's the next generation coming up that's going to have that heavy burden. So what trends are you seeing? And I know there's a big difference from New Zealand to the United States, where I am. But globally, what trends are you seeing there in terms of potentially more diversity, more young people getting involved in logistics?
Definitely younger people. And also what I see is because the workforce is shrinking, like globally in the first world country, I think we are very aligned with that. We always need to be more creative about how to attract talent. Okay. And if some of the things that doesn't need to be manually done, how can we work smarter? And these are the key themes to keep the good people in place, keeping the system in place, just so that we can keep the world moving while we're facing those current challenges. I also see that, like, of course, like the younger generation don't have a lot of understanding on logistics, supply chain, how one thing moves from A to B. So that means that they're more likely to opt for a career that maybe more software. A lot of my friends, young kids, talk about being a YouTuber, which is like it may not be what they think because they're only 10 years old, right? And so there's so much misunderstanding and so much knowledge gap. So I really see that the continuous education, the technology change, and also how do we manage such a change, big shift in workforce, the trends that are coming up in the medium to long term.
Okay, so that it's interesting that you say that. I'm seeing it too. I'm seeing a huge shift, and there's a lot of there seems to be a lot of attention paid towards non-traditional ways of people making a living, and we're seeing it. We have cities that we are really struggling to hire in because people just don't want to go to work. And I think that we talk about the lessons learned during COVID, and I think that's one of those lessons learned is there's a huge chunk of the workforce that looked at that, and I don't think they said, or I don't think the lesson they learned was, I don't want to work. I really think what they said was, you mean my job can be eliminated that fast? My life can be canceled that fast? And what I think they did is I think they stepped back and they said, well, wait a second, how can I have more control over my own life? How can I control my income? And that's what I think happened was they started to look at ways that they could say, I don't want to go to work for this organization that can just shut me down that fast. You just say, hey, you're done. And I think that that's what's really spurring this new industry where people are out there, being a creator. They're out there saying, how can I make myself the product? How can I contribute to the world in a way that I control my future, my destiny? And who knows where that's going to go? I think at some point someone's going to have to go produce the product. Someone's going to have to go grow the
exactly.
Food. And we're going to have, and I think it goes back to what you said earlier, the sustainability of all of it. And quite frankly, I don't think people understand what that word means, sustainability. And I think that my fear is that in the next 5 years, there's going to be a crippling effect where we are not going to have enough people willing to do the work that needs to be done to sustain the world population.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think some of the key thing, and I found really nice that when I was in a leadership position, what I could do is influence the organizations just so that we can work a bit smarter, and so that people who are doing the work right now, yes, it may be a bit boring, but also they can be their creative self to take ownership. And these are the things that if they can, take a bit of ownership and create a destiny and seeing a bit of path in the organization, or just because we're in this industry that is very manual, but if you're a creative person, you might be able to say, start a different Uber, that sort of thing. These can be very radical, but of course, if you don't really understand how goods move from A to B, you're probably not going to come up with something like Uber, some radical way of working smarter, which could create a huge fortune for yourself. So that kind of innovation and creativity, I think, with the next generation of leader, I think there will be more of those ideas, and I'd like to encourage that.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I think you're in a perfect position to be able to do that as an educator. You've got I mean, for the most part, you have a captive audience to hear you, and you'll inspire. There's I think the educators today have not only a great burden but a great privilege, and it's something I envy because I know I can't do it. So I look to folks like you and say, thank you for what you do.
No problem at all. I think, the different people with different position, the conversation and the way that we collaborate, we then reach out to the wider group and network, and that's what we need to do, because how many people really get a chance to be sponsored to do MBA? If you're busy driving a truck, if you're busy doing work on the floor, I know I come from that space. So, and this is something that if we could sort of make it more, generalize it a bit more, share more of these knowledge and idea, I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. So, Christine, I will, of course, put links to your book and links to your social media platforms in the links of this and the links of where I posted on social media. How else would someone get in contact with you if they wanted to?
Usually it's best to email me, particularly with the time differences. It's christine@cwy.co.nz.
Okay, perfect. And I'll also include that in the comments of this video and everywhere I share this online as well. Christine, I'm really grateful that you agreed. And just so anybody watching, just so you know, on very short notice, Christine agreed to sit down and talk to me. So super grateful for that. I love the fact that there's a book about logistics that we can hype up, and I encourage anybody. It is a quick read. It's very inexpensive off Amazon, and it arrives in just a few days. So please check it out. Support the logistics industry, specifically support females in logistics. Christine, I wish you all the luck in the world in hopefully writing your next book about sustainability and getting people to understand the real challenge there that I think we're facing globally. And I appreciate everybody watching this. I hope that you've subscribed at this point and click the bell so you're notified every time a new video goes live. Stay tuned. We have a lot more great conversations coming up. Christine, thank you again. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you for having me.